Hi everybody, Tim Hughes here. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Digital Leadership Associates. With me today I've got Michael Labate from SAP and Joël Labate from Johns Hopkins University. We got today's Tim talk is a little bit special. I don't normally allow slides, but today I've actually made a special dispensation. Michael came to me and said, I've got this great way of actually measuring social selling. I've got this great way of actually getting a benchmark for salespeople. And what Michael and Joel are going to go through today is exactly that. So really, I'm just going to hand it over to you guys and take it away, Michael and Joel.
Well, thank you very much, Tim. We're glad to be here. So I'm Michael Labate, head social selling's operations and program development at SAP. This is a global program. I'm also on I'm a member of the board of the Sales Enablement Society. And I'm really excited about this opportunity. I came to Tim about, it must be about 8 months ago, earlier this year, and said, I think we have something that's pretty innovative. I'd like to get your opinion on it. And when we started to expose this to folks like Tim and other leaders in the industry, we realized we might be onto something. And we've sort of been exploiting this opportunity. And the opportunity is around how to help people realize that changing their behavior to approach the modern buyer is required. It's reacting to the change. We're not in a proactive environment. So using benchmarks to measure selling performance is something that we have been exploring and are starting to roll out at SAP. So let me first start a little bit with some of our why. Why does SAP care so much about transforming selling and marketing behaviors as an organization? It really has to do with the buying. This slide, it's in many ways starting to sound cliche. 70% buying journey and almost 90% of decisions made before a buyer is making contact with a vendor, and by the time they do, the decision's already made. But it's true. This slide is 3 years old. This buying behavior is continuing in this way. It's becoming even more difficult to engage. Selling perspective, buyers are influenced mostly by their peers. And I want to frame up this discussion with some history about the program. So in 2012, we invested in 50 licenses of LinkedIn Sales Navigator. And at that time, this was an investment mostly on by putting a tool in place to help with the sales, with mapping accounts, with generating leads, but it was just a tool. And the key aspect of this particular milestone for us was that it really didn't have the behavior. Once we started putting the behavior in place, we started to see the gains. So we quickly went up to about 1,000 licenses. And in 2014, marketing organization together with sales at SAP joined hands in a very symbiotic way to do two things. One, to handle the tools and technologies aspect of this transformation. And on the other hand, marketing would provide the training and enablement of this particular behavior. By 2015, we did a pilot. We had a challenger against the control. The control was a team in Manila, Philippines. Let's just say we split the teams in half. Folks selling the same kinds of stuff to the same sort of market with the same environment in a region. So pretty much everything was the same. And what we saw when we had just the tool in place versus the tool and the behavior of social selling, and the challenger produced 7 times the months of proceeding training behavior. And that really turned us on to wanting to scale this across the globe. So by 2016, what we did was we started putting some flags in CRM so we can track the behavior. And when we did that, and we asked the community who was trained and enabled to flag whether social has been any kind of behavior that they learned during training was involved in their sales motion or in that contact with the customer. And when they did, we would pick that up in our CRM. And at the end of that year, we had $2 billion in pipeline and $1 billion in revenue associated or flagged as having social behaviors attributed to the deals. Now, here's what's interesting. It's not the $2 billion or the $1 billion that's important. I could have made that number $100 million. What matters to us is how much better or more productive or efficient is that $2 billion and that $1 billion in booked and won over another $2 billion and $1 billion in booked and won. It's about how much better is performing. So by 2017, we were committed to evaluate ways to start to show the difference in how much better or worse social by the end of that year, we had 11,000 people trained. We had 15,000 licenses of LinkedIn Sales Navigator. So we're talking about a large body of data. When we manually analyzed the data in those numbers in 2016, what we saw on average was something remarkable. We saw that on average, the pipeline value conversion rate was plus 4 percentage points greater for the pipeline that was flagged as social versus the pipeline that was not flagged. And 300% larger deal sizes for those that were flagged as social and those that weren't. So 2018 was about innovation. How can we take what we just learned and automate this in a really big way? So to give you an idea of the magnitude of SAP's social selling investment, there are 6 people that get paid to do this job as global heads. And remarkably, everyone else is they're volunteers. That's the way that we've been able to scale this program, is by showing the value at the top and on the bottom. The folks that are in the trenches addressing the customer and those that are at the top that are driving the organization have taken notice of this value. And people have stood up and said, I want to be part of this. So we have 35 regional program managers that manage or help manage 250 volunteer trainers that have subsequently trained a total aggregate sum this year of 14,000 people across 130 countries. As a result of the program, just wrapping up some of our history, we had a couple of accolades, industry accolades, recognize and acknowledge some of the things that SAP is doing with social selling and social behaviors. What I really like to enjoy is the business impact. Someone who I admire once said, it's not about the effort, it's about the results. And this is results. A 60% lift in quota attainment for people who invest in social is huge, right? Increasing your opportunity ownership by 200%. Who would not want to look at this kind of transformation as an individual who is selling into these markets? Whether you're in lower general business, you're in general business, or you're selling into key accounts, the deal sizes are resulting in sometimes 3 times larger on average by using social behaviors. So that's the end of our giving the presentation about our history, but I want to focus a little bit more on why. Everything that we do surrounds a why, and that why relates to the customer. Change is something that affects all of us, especially in the last decade. There's been profound consequences. Some are good, some are not so good, but one thing's for certain, it's constant, and we're going to continue to see this change. And particularly when I mean change, I'm talking about the change in buying behavior. So what I hope that you get out of this presentation is to gain some insight to the choices that we made as an organization in the face of change, and the things that we did to try to get in front of the curve again. Because everywhere you look, we're reacting to change, and where it's very difficult to be proactive. So to really talk about what change or where it comes from, let's take a step back at the moment and look at the last 20 years, right? So we start out in the mid 90s with this read-only web. You can download content, you can consume it, you can get smarter, you can download content, consume it, and get smarter, and you will continue to do that. Finally, technology steps into play about 13 years ago, 2005, and says, you know what? Rather than just downloading, learning, and getting smarter and keeping it to yourself, let's create a sharing mechanism. So now I can download, I can learn and get smarter. And all of a sudden, folks on the other side are saying, hey, I like what this person has to say. So they start to learn from me. Now I'm becoming a thought leader, and now I'm learning from them. And the circle starts to widen. And before you know it, buying behavior, the buyer is starting to use their power of their peer network. Think about it like a power plant of knowledge. You're downloading, you're learning, you're getting smarter, you're sharing, you're creating, you're engaging. And that cycle continues to happen, and technology continues to take advantage of this. So we have social web in 2005. And by 2010, the end of that decade, mobile becomes prevalent. And now we've got this voice-driven semantic web that's happening, where we're talking to devices and we're getting feedback. But think about what's happening. We're not talking to the vendor. We're talking to our peers, and we're talking to machines. And this is the way that it's headed. This is where it's headed. So how is it possible for a vendor to really get in front of any of this if what's been really happening here is that buyers are becoming smarter with other buyers and other peers? There's no incentive for them to have to call a vendor in the very early stage of having them solve, or at the interest of solving a problem. So there's three things that you need to play in this sport. You need to be able to engage inside of a community, which essentially is creating, you've got to create value, you have to earn trust. These three things allow you to play in the peer-to-peer influence sport. Oftentimes, most times today, vendors, solution providers are not playing in the sport. We're much later down the sales cycle. And this really resonates. The situation here is going to emphasize that exact situation. I'm going to tell a quick story. The story is about a B2B buyer in a mid-sized organization in New Zealand. This lady is shopping for modernizing HR processes in the cloud. So she's an HR executive. So she turns to her trusted network on LinkedIn, and she asks the question, is anyone out there familiar with this kind of transformation? And if so, would you mind allowing us to look at what that rollout is like? Here's what's remarkable. In 2 days, not one sales representative from any provider responded to this person. Instead, what happened was her peers completely controlled the narrative. Look in the circles. So I work for SAP. We sell SuccessFactors. Thankfully, SuccessFactors came in as a referral, but it was also surrounded by two of our competitors. Not one sales rep was there. What should have happened here? What should have happened is that a rep, a marketing demand agent, someone from any one of these organizations should have been building a brand around modernizing HR in the cloud. If you're passionate about what you sell, you should be building a brand around that. And if they did, and they had created that, I don't want to call it a pull or a push, more of an organic engagement. When the moment this lady turned to LinkedIn, there's a chance she might have came across that content. And that content could have been this organic discussion around modernizing HR in the cloud, and our organization could have been there as a first impression. Much earlier in the sales cycle is my point. 2 days is too late. Peers have become the influencer. So going back to this idea, how do you influence people to want to change their behavior? What's in it for them? If they're not doing that now, then why are they going to change? it's very, very difficult to change, especially when you're up against quota and you know you've got your mark and you've got to make it. And if you're not making it, changing in mid-flight is very, very difficult. So we had to come up with something that really shows the value. So the question mark on 2018 is about key indices. So let me give a metaphor that I think everyone can relate to. What else in the world is using indices to measure performance? Equity markets, the financial markets. So in this case, the Standard & Poor's index, the S&P 500, has a 13-week moving average. So analysts can measure categories against that moving average, especially if they're obviously part of the S&P 500. So in this case, you can look at the top part of the screen. You'll see that the financial, transportation, or Russell 2000 are exceeding the average, and there are some that are not, or are underperforming. So the question that we had was, can we measure people in the same way? And what does that look like? So, wow, I've exceeded quota. Excellent. But wait, I'm actually underperforming the index. Now think about this. If you're already getting to winner's circle, normally you let off the gas and you coast right through, you finish your quarter and you're doing well and you might be getting to winner's circle. There's really no incentive to keep pushing down. But if you knew that folks around you, your peers, who sell the same things you do in similar markets, in a similar environment, are actually performing better, and you're underperforming the average of that, whatever it is, conversion rate, deal size, etc. Now you have an incentive to want to do better. And that was the basis behind key indices. So to roll this out, we did three things. We started in 2016. We put some flags into our CRM so that we can get data. In 2017, we automated the export or the analysis of that data through a dashboard. So now we have key indices in a dashboard that gives us real-time data, analytics. In 2018 and to 2019, the idea is to take this data and put it down into the hands of the sales manager and the teammates of that particular team. And the idea is, if we can empower the sales performance review with indices to show how someone measures against a particular benchmark, we believe there would be inspiration for those individuals who are outperforming. We can learn from them, and those that are underperforming, we can provide support with the training mechanisms that are in place inside this organization. So this is the key indice portfolio. Nothing should be surprising here, except for one word. In these standard measures that we've been measuring sales for a long time, lead to acceptance, value conversion, volume conversion, one word here is really important. And it's the word beneath each one of these is called index. It's not just that you have a conversion rate. It's that what is the conversion rate relative to people like you? What is the speed to close index? Are you outperforming that speed to close index, or are you underperforming? So this is the basis of enhancing the common metrics by using dynamic averages rather than static measurement. So here's how it looks, or here's how it works. This slide is about how much better or worse are social behaviors affecting the value conversion index. So you have a pipeline and you've got conversion. These numbers represent only one thing. How much better is EMEA, North America, LAC, China, and APJ performing when social is used? So the way you read this is that EMEA, on average, has an 8.1 percentage point gain when social behaviors are used than when they're not. Now, if we were stopping here, we would be in proving mode. We would be saying that we need to prove to the organization that social behaviors are effective. But that's no longer the case at SAP. We already know they work. So it's the next transition of the slide that's most important. Why not use an average of that data from EMEA down to APJ and then measure each region according to the average? This is the S&P 500 13-week moving average metaphor. So now suddenly APJ does not look like it's doing well. It may be when you're using social behaviors in APJ, you typically get a better conversion. But compared to other regions, it's underperforming the index. It gets people to think, what's happening here? Now, we also might say, well, you can't compare market units in APJ to market units in EMEA. And I would agree with that. So the basis that the point here is just to show the way averages can work when you're measuring. But where they do make sense is on this slide. When you're talking about apples to apples, if you go inside of an organization and you can measure that team, so here we are again, here's my team, and I'll play that role for just a moment. And to play homage to my company, our German organization, I'll say that I'm running a team in Munich, and my team outperforms non-social selling pipeline value conversion by plus 2.9 percentage points. That's excellent. That means that we're actually doing really well when we use social behaviors. But come down below this line and look what's happening. This is the whole point. I'm underperforming the global index. I'm underperforming the regional index of teams like me in EMEA, and extremely relevant, I'm underperforming the other teams, say in Dusseldorf or other areas, Frankfurt or Waldorf, who are also selling into the same kinds of accounts that I am. I'm underperforming by a 0.5 percentage point for pipeline value. This does not show this is not a diagnostic treatment. What this does is it expresses symptoms. That's what these key indices are intended to do. By this point, if we were doing this in real life, what happens is I can call upon my training resources to help me understand how to improve. And that training resource will come in and do a diagnostic and tell me if I'm going to go home with a cold or if I'm going to the hospital. It's not a diagnostic that key indices is intended to provide. It's about helping to show a symptom. So there's a lot of folks to thank. One of them is on this, well, actually two of them are in here, Tim Hughes and Joël Labate. There's lots of folks in the industry who've been helping to inform this methodology, and a lot of great folks inside the organization on the left side of our screen who have been supporting the adoption and rollout of key indices within the organization. So the goal from here is to continue to use indices to measure selling performance, to help inspire people that, number one, have not adopted social behaviors, and number two, if you have, to give you some insights beyond the social selling index score of LinkedIn, to supplement those kinds of measurements to help you do better. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it off to my esteemed colleague, Dr. Joël Labate, who I partnered with to help me validate academically the impact that key indices can have on selling behavior. Without further ado, Dr. Joël Labate.
Thank you, Michael, and also thank you, Tim, for hosting us today to talk about something very interesting and also very important in sales and in marketing. So I am Joël Labate. I'm a marketing and sales professor at Johns Hopkins University Carey Business School, and I am also the faculty director for digital marketing and sales transformation. And I like to say that I am a marketing and sales professor, trying to be both at the same time, because sometimes marketing and sales, they don't talk to each other very well. At least I'm trying in my brain to have my left brain talking to my right brain about marketing and sales, because they go together. In fact, I call that mark selling, because in sales, you have to leave a mark, and that's the marketing part. So what I'm going to talk about today is the impact of the key indices, if there are impact of the key indices on performance, but also what drive key indices performance, especially from a social selling behavior. Because we know today that In fact, when you think about the evolution of marketing as a discipline and now the evolution of sales, in fact, marketing as a discipline has been shaped as a discipline maybe 60 to 70 years ago by things like railroads, airplanes, and then radio, and then TV, and then the internet, which helped marketers reach out to their customers by leveraging new media for that purpose. When you think about what are the foundations of an economy, in fact, you need three things. You need a power source, you need a raw material, and you need a transportation system. In the old economy, or the traditional economy, if you will, the power source is electricity. The raw material can be woods, for example, or steel, and the transportation system will be the railroads and the planes or the boats. But now in the digital economy, we still have the same foundations, but they are a little bit different. So the power source is electronics, obviously, and computers. The raw material becomes information, and the transportation system is the internet. With that, you have an economy which is called the digital economy, which means that you can create value, you can manufacture value, you can deliver value without even going to the places where your customers are, because they are already on the internet, which is very important, because what has shaped marketing 70 years ago is shaping sales now. This is changing sales. And of course, there are very important social media platforms like LinkedIn that are very relevant to help modern sales professionals to actually reach out to their customers. And this is what we're going to talk about today, and also measuring the impact on that of sales on sales performance. So if you can move on the slides, I would say next. Okay, so we did a research with SAP, Michael and Kirsten Boileau, to try to understand the impact of social selling index from LinkedIn, but mainly your social selling activities and behaviors, and the impact on your sales performance in terms of indices. Next, Michael. So what's the research like? Well, it's big, it's broad, and it's worldwide. So we have a huge sample size of over 10,000 active LinkedIn Navigator users from SAP, over 54 countries. And what is very interesting about this research is we were able to have key account managers, so more complex sales, if you will, but also general business, so less complex sales, general sales, if you will. So we measure both types of sales behaviors, but also we have a time span of, we were able to have the LinkedIn SSI score, Social Selling Index, from 2017, and look at the impact of the social selling behavior in the digital world of modern sellers at SAP, key account managers and general business, on 2018 social sales key indices. So we know that it's very hard to assess causality in research, but somehow here we were able to do that because we have 2017 data factor into 2018 data. So we have a timeline, which is what happened in the past drove or not what is happening now, which is in 2018. So that's the research setting. Next, please, Michael. So what we are trying to do is to understand in the digital world for modern sales people at SAP, the impact of their social selling behavior, which I just mentioned, through their LinkedIn SSI scores on the key indices that Michael just presented. Now, we all use LinkedIn. Obviously, we are over 500 million people doing that. But LinkedIn created a very interesting index called the SSI score to measure the extent to which you use LinkedIn well. And to use LinkedIn well, in fact, there are 4 things you need to do, and it's called your SSI score. First, you need to establish your professional brand and become a subject matter expert in your respective area. And number 2, especially in sales, you need to find the right people that you might want to connect with. Number 3, if you want to appeal to them and appeal to your customers and become interesting to them, you need to engage them with insights. And number 4, you need to enhance your relationship, which is called build relationship, and find new people in your network and make your relationship better and bigger. So these are 4 different criteria and factors that LinkedIn is monitoring to assess your SSI score. They are out of 125 for each of them. So I have the example here of Mario Martinez SSI score. Obviously, he has a good one, which is 92. And in sales, we used to say that above 70, it's a good SSI score. But we don't know how those different factors of your SSI score might indeed or in fact impact sales performance. That's the research question. And if so, which one is the most important one? Because obviously, even if they all represent 25% of the overall score, they might not play at the same level. So that was the purpose of the research, to try to understand the impact on the LinkedIn SSI score on the social index. Now, why do you need to care about your SSI score? Well, if you have children, I think you care about their GPAs. I think you care about their report cards, where your SSI score is your GPA if you are in sales. So that's very important indicator of how well you do. But now we can assess also how well you do in terms of sales, especially in terms of indices. So next, please, Michael. So first, we're going to focus on the different types of factors that are important in your overall LinkedIn SSI score. So here, what we are trying to explain, it's in this very simple equation, the SSI score, which is the Y. And the SSI score, it is explained by 4 factors: establish your professional brand, find the right people, engage with insight, and build relationship. But what does that mean to have the different indicators on each of them? So for example, you can see that the most important one to have a better SSI score is to engage with insight. And this factor, the weight of this factor is 0.40. What does that mean? It means that if you increase by 1 unit this factor, engage with insight, you're going to increase your SSI score by 40%. If you increase find the right people by 1 unit, you're going to increase find the right people by 29%. Well, this is very important because it tells you exactly where you need to focus your effort to increase your SSI score, but behind your SSI score, your social selling performance and behavior. So this is good information, but it's not enough. So first, we can conclude that all those 4 factors are not made equal. And we used to think, though, by just looking at them through the LinkedIn SSI score, but they are not made equal. Now, the other question is, are they made equal if you are a key account manager or a general salesperson, let's say, for your sales performance? This is what we're going to talk about now. So here, we are trying to measure the impact of what we just saw, the 4 factors of the SSI score, on the indices that Michael described a little bit earlier. What do we have here? So here, we have the results of the analysis. Over 10,000 people in 54 countries. For now, we're going to talk about the general business first, which is less complex sales. What matters to increase your performance, it's mainly 2 things. As you can see in green, build relationship, and in red, build your professional brand. The other ones that matter, they matter, but when you take everything all together, they matter less. What is interesting here? What's very interesting here is these are general business. Salespeople with less complex sales. Yet, very important to build your professional brand and to become still a subject matter expert, even if you are not in complex sales. But also, usually for the SSI score, build relationship, which is the fourth one, is about expanding your network. Well, it looks like this is very important, especially if you are in general sales. This is going to help you achieve three things: value conversion of your deal, volume conversion of your deal, and speed to close, which is very interesting from an index perspective. So now, why index are important? Like Michael mentioned, index are very important in finance. Why? Because they describe the market. And we need to know, especially in sales, if we are doing better or not than the market. In fact, this is what sales excellence is about. Looking for sales excellence is finding the reason why we have discrepancies between excellence and average. And what is it that we can do to bring the average to excellence? By benchmarking. With the indexes, you have a benchmark data within the company to help average become excellent, because it's a dynamic average. Instead, if you measure only sales quota, it is at the individual level. It's not at the generalized dynamic level. With indices, you have a more generalized dynamic level. And I want to say this: what's the role of a marketing manager or a VP of marketing? The role of a VP marketing is to bring the market, which is outside the company, inside the company, and explain to everyone, this is what we need to do. Bring the market, which is outside, inside the company, and explain to everyone. This is exactly what indices do, because they are dynamic average, capturing the dynamic of the market and not just your personal sales quota, telling to everyone, this is what's working, this is why, so let's bring average to excellence by adjusting our training, our behavior, and these kind of things. So now let's go to the second example for key account managers. And can you do that again quickly, Michael? Come back to this one, this one, this one, this one. So here, what is very interesting is what matters for general business does not matter the same way for key account managers. Yet, what does matter for key account managers? Mainly two things. Again, 10,000 over 54 countries. What is very interesting here is still, if you are a key account manager, the second factor of the SSI score, which is find the right people, it's still important. You still need to find the right people in the decision center. In fact, we know in sales that the decision center is becoming more complex, and it takes longer, and it's more collegial. So you need to find the right people that can help you to make actually the needle move in the decision center. Even if you think you already know everyone, you might not. Number two, very important, of course, engage with insights, especially for key account managers. So this was the most important factor driving your SSI score. It is obviously the most important one for key account managers. Why? Because your customers today are very knowledgeable, and you have to bring value by bringing insights. If you don't do that very well, you won't matter very well to them. So what is interesting here, it's not just about your sales pipeline. It's about your people pipeline. Who you have in your people pipeline to help you move the needle. And the people and the stakeholders around you that's going to help you bring more insights to your customers. If you cannot do that, you cannot achieve what they really expect from you. Next slide, please, Michael. So as a conclusion here, we can say that for GB, the performance is really about volume, value, and speed. And this mainly relies on establish your professional brand, very important in the digital world, and also build relationships, keep building relationships. For the key account managers, what is very important for them, it's the value and deal opportunity size for the key indices, and how you can achieve that above and beyond your sales quota is finding the right people. Don't stop finding the right people, but also don't stop engaging them with insight, because their expectations or at that level. So there was some very interesting results that we were able to assess globally, and some of them were very counterintuitive. And a very important finding is, yes, key indices work to drive performance, but also all the SSI score for factors do not behave the same because of your roles. So we need to pay attention and drive different type of social selling behaviors. So that was the presentation and the research we wanted to share with you. So in general sales, professional branding is critical for your personal differentiation. And we know that big relationship takes time, but it accelerates deals volume, value, and speed. We saw that in the key indices. In complex sales, continuously searching for the right people creates value and opportunities for you. And staying at the top of your industry, of course, takes time, but still engage complex customers. That would be the overall conclusion. Thank you very much. And then we will see you on LinkedIn. Thank you,
Joel. Michael, is that the presentation completed?
That is the presentation. Yes, sir.
Fantastic. Thank you. That was really insightful. And the slides actually helped to bring it to life, because I think it's really important to see the difference. There's no questions on the chat at all, but I've got one question, which goes back to the original conversation that we had back in February, I think, of 2018, sure. Which was the fact that you'd got all of this data, and the fact that you were able to say that in salespeople in Germany in public sector, you would expect something. In the UK salespeople in public sector, you'd expect something, and in salespeople in Colombia selling to public sector, you would expect something. And what you're able to do is actually measure that. Now, it might not be right or wrong, because it might be easier or more difficult selling in Colombia to the public sector, but you're able to get this level of benchmark that we've not been able to do before.
Well, that's exactly right. You have to be cognizant of, I like to simplify it to a fruit stand. If I'm selling apples out of a fruit stand, I want to compare my behavior to someone else who's selling apples, right? The solution is an apple. It's not an apple and orange. So if for example, if the economic conditions and the buying conditions inside of Colombia are very different from that of some other country, to your example, then creating an average may not be relevant. But it doesn't necessarily mean that that they should focus on aspects of the SSI different than what Joel's research shows. So it depends. So I think you have two different things here. One, using averages to stimulate behavior. Two, taking the insights from the SSI for areas of the SSI score, and depending on who you sell into, if you're a general business or key, you can use this research to show where you should be focusing your time, because not all SSI quadrants are equal.
And the next question, so where do you go from here?
So for us as an organization, the idea is to adopt, or rather, let me say it this way, to integrate key indices into the individual performance evaluation that a sales manager has with their teams. Now, an organization the size of SAP, where we have thousands and thousands of quota carriers and tens of thousands of people who are very close to sales or support sales in some way, it's extraordinary sort of effort to roll that out. So where we go is, hey, we know social works. We've been doing that at scale for a long time. Yep. We have training resources in place to respond to problems or to opportunities. Now let's exploit the data that we've been able to achieve. Let's take a team, could be general business or key accounts, doesn't matter. Let's take one country, one market unit, and let's put key indices down into the sales performance review to see if it actually inspires that manager and the team to take action to produce better results.
So in terms of the QBR of salespeople, to actually use that as a proactive way of not managing, but saying this is the way that we would expect you to be aligned with your peers.
Yeah, I mean, and the question might be, Tim, if you and I were in that team and I'm below the average and you're above the average, I might come over and say, hey, what's going on? And in our competitive nature of sales, you might not want to let me know that, but the manager certainly cares about that, right? And I think
and from a coaching perspective, I mean, quite often with indices, they can be used as a stick rather than a carrot. And quite often, you know, I've worked for organizations where indices were used as a way of beating people rather than a way of coaching people along.
Well, I think in the environment we are here's I think there's a little bit of there's something unique that's happened in this transformation that we shared and what you've been making a living on and the rest of us in the social selling world. And that is this: if you don't change your behavior and you're waiting for the phone to ring, when the phone rings, you get that one call and they're going to buy something from you. You probably missed 9 other calls that didn't come through because those decisions went somewhere else. So we're hoping that indices isn't a stick. We're hoping that this is it illuminates or gives you a light, a guiding light of sorts that allows you to make a decision to change your behavior when you can see others are either doing at par with you or better. It creates the natural instinct, I think, that's produced by the amygdala, if I'm not mistaken, the emotional bank of the brain. If you know you can be doing better and you are a highly competitive person by nature, especially in sales or demand agent in marketing, will you take steps to improve with the additional insights? And that's the way that we're trying to evaluate this. And one more thought. So I think it was Jamie Shanks. I was on a call with Jamie Shanks once, and he said, where do you go from the organization outside into the industry? Well, imagine this, Tim. Imagine that once because we're rolling this out right now, right? This isn't something that we're starting to do this. So at some point, when you get really good at this, what about when you lift it outside of the organization and you create almost a consumer index of sorts where you publish these indices for the industry to use? Now you've got several organizations that know if you sell into this kind of account, these kinds of cloud solutions, you should be your conversion rate should be here. Now you have a benchmarking application for the industry to leverage and not just a single organization. Publishing the data, and I think the world is going that way anyway with machine learning, big data, and AI. So I think that's an opportunity.
I think if you took the average salesperson and it's by country, immediately you'll get people folding their arms and saying, "Oh yeah, but we're public sector, or we're life sciences, or we're manufacturing and we're different." And I mean, do you have the vertical market? If I'm selling in the UK into life sciences, can you benchmark me across the world?
Yeah, well, you would benchmark yourself across others selling in life sciences, and
right.
I mean, it goes back to you're not the only person in the sales team. You're not the only account exec. And even if you have territory, and I was just talking to an SAP colleague of mine, actually, funny enough, lives in my neighborhood. He's an account executive for public sector for the Northeast region. There are other people like that, public sector, in the Southeast region, right? So you can look at yourself compared to others, maybe in the Southwest and the Northwest, and look at ways that you're performing versus others. I think particularly, though, Tim, that the frontline quota carriers and the digital demand agents that generate leads and help build opportunities to pipeline and close I think that relationship, those are the folks who I see gaining immediate value. It's the folks that are hunting or looking to farm for leads, nurturing opportunities. I think they're going to be able to compare themselves to averages of folks that sell like they do. Can you compare, the EMEA economic conditions and selling conditions for cloud HR software to those in other parts of the world? Probably not. But when you zoom in down to the sales team and you've got, 10, 15 people that are behaving the way that you are, I think it becomes relevant. And that's what we're trying to explore with this research. So 2019 is about coming back to the sales enablement community and sharing the results. Were key indices useful to help improve selling performance inside SAP with using averages to stimulate? That's the follow-up to this conversation.
Okay, fantastic. Any final? Yeah.
If I can add something, Tim, it's also what is interesting. It's also capturing the complexity of the market within the organization and outside the organization, and it's complementary to quota. But at the same time, it says something else about the complexity of the market. It's a new KPI to capture that kind of complexity and tell you where you stand, and also it helps you being enabled better because of where you stand versus the average. So it's another indicator of the complexity of the market that you can bring inside because you have the market behavior through the indices. And we all know that we can negotiate sales quota with our managers every single year. But
yes.
The indices says something else.
Yeah, and I'm just back from setting up a DLA in Singapore in Asia, and the market there is very different than the market here in Europe. And we also operate in North America, and the market there is very different there as well. But people buy differently, people sell differently. So I'm not sure that you can compare. But yes, when at the end of salespeople are salespeople, and there can be some comparison.
Yeah, I think you're right. Anyway, guys, you hit it right on the head, Tim. It's not comparing. If you zoom out and it's a regional view compared to a regional view, that's not going to be. I don't see that being effective as much that if you zoom all the way in and you're focusing in Singapore and Malaysia and other areas, right? China, Greater China, Hong Kong, Taiwan, and you start to look at the region and zooming in and seeing, are the buying behaviors similar? I mean, you've got to be smart about this. Look at the patterns of buying behaviors. Look at the economic and socioeconomic conditions of that region, the market conditions. If a team has got more than one person in that team selling into those accounts, it only takes, once you've got more than one person, you start creating an average, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 people. 6 people selling in the Manila, Philippines, as I shared before, or more. I think we had several more than that. You certainly can create an average because everyone is behaving in very similar conditions inside of that local market.
And I don't think there's any sales team in the world that says they have enough leads and meetings.
Right. Yeah, well, that's true.
We could always do with more, couldn't we?
I think supplementing the data is important, right? I think what you're touching on is we don't want to substitute the information. It's not going to replace. I think this is to supplement. We explored this in our organization, having a couple of more boxes that show the average and having that conversation. Hey, you're doing well. You're getting there, and you're 20% more to go, and you're at quota, or 10% you're closing in. I just want you to be aware that the average within our group is here, and you're almost outperforming that average. That's wonderful. I mean, it's an additional insight. Or you're not performing at the average, and you're getting close. What can we do to help you? We don't need more meetings, and I hate to look at it as more insights. It's about what insights should we be looking at. Rather, let me say it this way: we've been measuring everything the same way, and now social behaviors have come onto the scene. And what we have today, Tim, as you know, is the SSI score, but that's not enough. So we should look at ways to improve. If we have to change behaviors to match the modern buyer, should we also look at the way we measure ourselves as we change those behaviors?
And we should.
Thank you again. I really appreciate the interview.
You're welcome, Michael and Joel. This has been fantastic. I feel that we're starting on a journey. We do need to measure this, and at the moment, we're what does good look like from a social seller? I don't think anybody really knows. The only measure that we have is SSI, and that only covers LinkedIn, which is only 30% of your social graph. So this is a really good step in terms of getting measurement and getting some sort of level of benchmark. So I really appreciate you coming on and talking about it. Thank you very much.
Thank you again, Tim. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, thank you.
Thanks, Joel.
Thanks,
Michael.
it's